All right, let's just jump right in. When you think about the big names in the Bible, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of us, we probably picture this lineup of saints and heroes, these larger than life figures who are just brimming with wisdom and strength. But today, we're going to look at what the text actually says, and, well, it turns out to be a much messier and honestly a much more human story.
And right there, that's the heart of what we're digging into today. The popular idea we have of these characters often clashes, and I mean really clashes, with the raw, unfiltered story we find on the page. Something genuinely unexpected happens when you put the legends aside and just read. And this really lays out the disconnect, doesn't it? On one hand, we expect these flawless heroes, these polished legends. But on the other hand, the reality the text gives us is a cast of people who are consistently frightened, deeply confused, and often just broken. This isn't some gallery of perfect humans. It's a record of deeply flawed ones. To see just how deep this theme runs, we've got to go all the way back. I mean, right back to the very beginning. Let's take a look at how this whole human story gets framed from page 1. Just think about that for a second. The grand opening of the human story doesn't kick off with some moment of glory or triumph. It starts with a huge failure. The very first people we meet, Adam and Eve, they don't rise to the occasion. They hide. They literally shrink back into the shadows, totally consumed by shame. And their reactions are just so painfully human, right? It's not just that they hide in the bushes, they hide from any kind of responsibility. They start pointing fingers, blaming each other. The trust that held their world together is just shattered. And all that's left is shame and fear. These aren't moral giants. They're just the first people to feel completely and utterly lost. Which brings up a pretty big question. If your goal was to write an inspiring story full of perfect heroes, is this really how you'd start it? With a scene of hiding and blaming? It's such a strange choice for a heroic epic. You have to wonder what's going on. Okay, so let's move forward a bit and see if things change. Because this pattern of imperfection, it doesn't stop there. It actually becomes a running theme as we meet the so-called patriarchs and the great leaders of the story. I mean, take Noah. The guy's achievement is off the charts. He builds this massive ark and survives a global catastrophe. He's the hope for the future of humanity. So what happens right after? He collapses in a drunken mess. The text just puts it right there, no sugarcoating the massive gap between his public duty and his private failure. Then you've got Abraham. He gets this incredible, world-changing promise to be the father of a great nation. But his journey isn't some heroic march of confidence. He actually lies to kings just to save his own skin. He doubts the very promise that's supposed to define his entire existence. For decades, he's just waiting, full of uncertainty and fragility. And Moses, wow. I mean, Moses is arguably one of the most important figures in the entire story. But look at how he's introduced. He's a deeply reluctant hero. When he's called, his very first instinct is to argue back, to insist he's the wrong guy for the job. And all through his leadership, he struggles with his temper and even flat out disobeys. That's hardly the resume of a perfect, confident leader. So when you put it all together, a really clear picture starts to emerge. The text just doesn't seem all that interested in trying to impress us with how great these people are. It seems to be focused on something totally different, a process of transformation. And it's a transformation that's slow, really difficult, and a lot of the time, it's not even complete. Okay, so what happens when these characters finally make it? When they reach the absolute peak of power and success, does that finally get rid of their flaws? Well, let's take a look at the kings and prophets who had the most influence. And this, right here, shows that the pattern holds even at the very top. You've got David, the legendary brave king, but the record shows he's also an adulterer and a murderer. Then there's his son Solomon, famous for his incredible wisdom, who ends up compromising his entire kingdom because of idolatry. And Elijah, one of the most powerful prophets, he hits a point of such despair that he becomes suicidal, literally begging for his life to be over. What's just so wild is how honest the record is about all this. The text lays out these huge moral and personal failures without making a single excuse. There's no PR spin, no attempt to manage their image. The really ugly parts are just left in the story for everyone to see. It's a total lack of any kind of heroic editing. And all of this forces us to ask the most important question of all. Why? Why would a foundational text go to all this trouble to document the failures of its most important people? It's just such a strange way to write your history. Because you have to remember, this isn't how other ancient cultures told their stories. Not at all. The goal was almost always to puff up your founders, to turn them into flawless myths. The Bible does the complete opposite. It seems dead set on exposing its founders, showing them in all their messy human fragility. So we really have to just pause here and think about that. Why would a book that people consider sacred, that they build their lives around, so carefully save this relentless record of human failure? What could possibly be the point? Well, we can start by figuring out what the text is not trying to do. Its purpose is clearly not to hold these people up as perfect role models. The message is not, hey, look how amazing these people were. No, the message seems to be something much more profound. It's as if the text is saying, look at how fragile and flawed human beings are. And then notice how somehow the story continues anyway. The focus shifts away from the person and onto the resilience of the story itself. The fear, the massive failures, the crippling doubt, none of it is a showstopper. None of it is powerful enough to bring the story to a grinding halt. It just keeps moving forward, carried along by these very imperfect people.
And it's clearly not their own certainty that's pushing them forward. We've seen how full of doubt they are.
And it is absolutely not their moral perfection. We've just spent this entire explainer looking at their deep, deep flaws. It has to be something else. There's some other force, some other motivation at the heart of this thing that keeps the story alive, even when its main characters are falling apart. And that leaves us with the single most important question this whole story raises. We've seen the cast of deeply imperfect people, so what is this force that moves them to keep going despite everything? Answering that question, well, that takes us straight to the core message of the entire Bible.